My father raised his glass to my brother and called him the future of our family company. Everyone clapped. My mother smiled like the decision had already been blessed. My sister reached for her phone, ready to post the perfect Christmas Eve photo. And I stood at the far end of the table with a sealed folder in my hand, because inside that folder was the proof that the son he trusted had almost destroyed everything. My name is Natalie Whitaker. And for most of my life, I was the quiet daughter in a loud family. Not quiet because I had nothing to say. Quiet because, in our house, people only listened when my brother spoke. I arrived in Charleston on Christmas Eve, just before sunset. The harbor was turning gold, and the old streets were glowing with lights wrapped around iron balconies and oak trees. My family home sat 3 blocks from the water, a white-columned house with green shutters, polished brass handles, and windows so tall they made every room look like it belonged to another century. From the outside, it looked like tradition. From the inside, it felt like a museum built to honor everyone except me. My father, Warren Whitaker, was in the library when I walked in. He was 72, but he still carried himself like a man who expected rooms to stand straighter when he entered them. He had built Whitaker Freight and Rail from a small regional carrier into a company with yards, contracts, and a name people respected across the Southeast. To him, the company was not just a business. It was proof that the Whitakers mattered. My mother, Margaret, was in the dining room, checking the silverware for the 3rd time. She hugged me quickly, then looked over my shoulder as if she was already searching for the next thing to fix. That was my mother's gift. She could rearrange flowers while a house burned down. My brother, Preston, stood near the bar with a glass in his hand and a story already half told. He was tall, handsome, confident, and very good at sounding like he understood things he had never had to earn. My father called him a natural leader. I called him lucky, but never out loud. My sister, Betrayal, was sitting by the fireplace, taking a photo of her champagne glass in front of the Christmas tree. She had married well, posted often, and believed every room was improved by her presence. When she saw me, she smiled without standing up. "Natalie, you made it." The way she said it made arriving home sound like a favor I had finally remembered to repay. I took off my coat and carried my overnight bag upstairs to the room I had slept in as a child. Nothing had changed. Same blue curtains. Same narrow desk. Same shelf where my old debate trophies still sat behind a row of framed photos of Preston shaking hands with men in suits. I stood there for a moment, looking at the room, and felt something I had felt too many times before. I had grown up in that house, but I had never been invited into its future. When I was little, I thought if I worked hard enough, someone would notice. I got the grades. I studied logistics before I could even explain why rail yards fascinated me. I spent summers filing invoices in the company office while Preston spent them golfing with clients. I learned how freight moved, how delays spread, how one missed transfer could cost a customer $500,000. But at dinner, my father asked Preston what he thought. In meetings, my father asked Preston to sit beside him. When I sent reports, they came back with one line. "Interesting thoughts, Natalie. Not useful. Not urgent. Not enough." That is the thing about being dismissed. It does not always happen with cruelty. Sometimes it happens with a smile. Sometimes it sounds polite. Sometimes it sounds like, "We'll consider that." And then nobody does. That evening, the dining room looked perfect. Candles burned low. Crystal glasses caught the light. The long table was dressed with white linen, pine branches, and gold-rimmed plates my mother only used when she wanted the family to look stronger than it was. But the air felt wrong. My father was too formal. My mother was too careful. Preston was too pleased with himself. I knew that look. It was the look of a man who believed the ending had already been written and that he had been cast as the hero. We sat down. The first half of dinner was all surface. Betrayal talked about a holiday fundraiser. Preston talked about a new client dinner in Atlanta. My mother asked if everyone wanted more wine. My father asked me how my consulting work was going, but his eyes had already moved away before I answered. "It's going well," I said. "Actually, I've been working on something connected to freight forecasting." Preston gave a small laugh. Still trying to fix the industry from your laptop? I looked at him. No. From the data. My father cleared his throat before I could say more. Tonight is not for shop talk. That was when I knew. He had brought us together not to discuss the company, but to announce a decision. After dessert, my father stood. The room went still. He lifted his glass, and the candlelight flashed across his wedding ring. I want to thank all of you for being here, he said. This family has carried a name for 3 generations. And names, like companies, must be protected when times change. Preston lowered his glass, pretending he did not already know what was coming. My father continued. Over the past year, Whitaker Freight and Rail has faced pressures that none of us can ignore. Rising costs, delayed contracts, technology shifts, aggressive competitors. After months of negotiation, I have decided to sell a controlling stake in the company to Halden Capital. My mother closed her eyes. Brielle stopped recording. I felt the room tilt. A controlling stake meant we would not own the company anymore. Not really. The Whitaker name would stay on the building for a while. Maybe on the trucks. Maybe on the letterhead. But the heart of it would be gone. Preston stood next. And Dad has asked me to help manage the transition, he said. I'll be staying on as Senior Executive Director. The title sounded expensive and empty. My father smiled at him. Preston understands relationships. He understands legacy. And more than anything, he understands this family. That was the first time my hand tightened around the sealed folder in my lap. Because inside that folder was an email thread from 8 months earlier. A report. A financial model. A risk forecast. And a message from Preston that read, "Don't send this to Dad. You'll only panic him." I had not sent it then. I had trusted him. That was my mistake. My father raised his glass higher. To Preston. To continuity. To the next chapter of Whitaker Freight and Rail. Everyone clapped. I did not. My father noticed. Natalie. His voice carried warning, not curiosity. I placed the folder on the table. I need to say something before you sign anything. Preston's smile disappeared. My mother whispered my name, the way she did when she wanted me to shrink back into place. But I was tired of shrinking. The company does not need to be sold, I said. Not like this. My father's jaw tightened. You do not have the full picture. I have more of it than you think. Preston stepped in quickly. Natalie, this has been reviewed by bankers, attorneys, and people who actually run operations. I turned to him. People who run operations should have noticed that our worst losses are coming from predictable yard delays, empty repositioning, and underpriced expedited loads. The room went silent. For the first time that night, my father looked directly at me. I opened the folder. 8 months ago, I built a recovery model using 3 years of internal shipment data. I found that the company was not failing because the market moved too fast. It was failing because we were making the same routing mistakes every week and calling them bad luck. Preston laughed once. That is not how this works. No, I said. That is exactly how this works. I pulled out the first page and slid it across the table. Our Charleston yard was absorbing delays from 3 feeder routes that should have been rerouted through Columbia twice a week. Our Birmingham contracts were being underpriced by an average of 12% because the pricing table did not account for seasonal congestion. And our Savannah overflow fees doubled because nobody updated the transfer schedule after the port expansion. My father stared at the numbers. I saw something move across his face. Not belief. Not yet. But recognition. He knew those losses. He had seen them separately. He had never seen them connected. I continued. I sent this to Preston in April. I asked him to bring it to you. He told me not to. My mother turned to Preston. Is that true? Preston's face went red. I told her it was not the right time. You told me I was being dramatic, I said. You said Dad needed confidence, not another spreadsheet from his little sister. Brielle looked down at her phone. My father slowly lowered himself into his chair. Preston, he said. Preston opened his mouth, then closed it. There are moments when a family hears the truth and nobody knows where to put it. My father looked back at me. Even if your numbers are accurate, it does not change the larger problem. We are too far behind. No, I said. We are behind because we kept ignoring the one part of the business that could still be fixed. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. Preston gave a sharp laugh. Oh, come on. I did not look at him. I opened the dashboard. For the last 6 months, I had been building a freight forecasting platform with 2 former dispatch managers and a data engineer I used to work with in Raleigh. We called it Yardlight. It tracked yard congestion, fuel spikes, late transfer patterns, contract margins, and idle equipment in one place. It did not replace people. It showed them what the old system was hiding. And because I knew my father would not listen to theory, I had found proof. I ran a limited pilot using public data, vendor reports, and 2 small carriers that agreed to test the system, I said. In 90 days, they cut late transfers by 18%. Idle time dropped by 21%. Margins improved on the exact type of regional contracts Whitaker is losing. My father leaned closer. I clicked to the next slide. And last week, I received a letter of intent from Northbridge Appliances. They will renew their distribution contract with Whitaker if we implement this system and meet the new delivery targets within 60 days. My mother covered her mouth. Northbridge was not just a client. It was the contract everyone had been afraid to lose. The contract Holden Capital was using to lower the sale price. My father read the letter twice. Preston reached for it. My father did not let go. How did you get this? He asked. I called them, I said. I asked what it would take for them to stay. Then I listened. It was such a simple sentence. But in our family, listening had become rare. Preston pushed back from the table. This is reckless. She went around the company. I went around the silence, I said. That landed harder than I expected. My father looked at me then, not as his quiet daughter, not as the child who should wait her turn, but as someone standing between him and the end of his life's work. For years, I had imagined that moment. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought I would want to make him hurt the way his doubt had hurt me. But sitting there, watching his face change, I felt something else. I felt tired. Because being right after years of being ignored does not feel as sweet as people think. It feels heavy. It makes you grieve the time that could have been saved if one person had listened sooner. My father turned to Preston. You saw this in April? Preston looked at the table. I saw a draft. You told me she was anxious about the sale. Preston said nothing. My father's hand closed around the edge of the folder. That was when the old order of our family cracked. Not loudly. Not with shouting. With silence. My mother sat very still. Brielle's phone was face down. Preston looked smaller than I had ever seen him. My father looked at me again. Why didn't you come to me directly? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the question carried the whole history of our family inside it. I tried, I said. For years. You taught me to bring proof, so I brought proof. Then you taught me proof did not matter unless Preston carried it into the room. My father flinched. Good. Some truths should hurt when they finally arrive. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, the harbor lights moved in the dark. For a long time, nobody spoke. Then he said, very quietly, I built this company so my children would have something solid beneath them. I closed the laptop halfway. No, Dad. You built something solid. Then you decided only one of your children was allowed to stand on it. My mother whispered, Natalie. I turned to her. And you let him. Her eyes filled, but I did not soften the words. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because peace built on silence is not peace. It is just a delayed argument. My father came back to the table. What do you want? That question changed everything. Not because he asked it gently. He did not. His voice was rough, defensive, almost angry. But for the first time, he was not asking what Preston thought. He was asking me. I took a breath. I want the sale paused for 30 days. I want full access to operations data. I want Preston removed from transition authority until the board reviews what happened. I want Northbridge handled through a recovery team, not Holden Capital. And if Yardlight meets the targets, I want a permanent executive role with decision power, not a courtesy title. Preston exploded. You cannot be serious. I looked at him. I have never been more serious. He turned to my father. You are not actually considering this. My father did not answer him. That was answer enough. The next morning, the house felt different. Not healed. Different. My father was already in the library when I came downstairs. The folder was open on his desk. My dashboard was on his screen. His coffee had gone cold. He looked older than he had the night before. I called Halden, he said. The signing is postponed. I nodded. He waited, perhaps expecting me to smile. I did not. I also called our attorney, he said. There will be a board review. And Preston. My father looked toward the closed door. He is angry. That was not my question. He rubbed his forehead. He is suspended from transition decisions. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. Then he said the words I had wanted once, back when I was younger and still thought approval could fix everything. I underestimated you. I looked at him for a long moment. Yes, I said. You did. He swallowed. I am sorry. The apology sat between us like a fragile glass. I could have picked it up. I could have accepted it quickly and made the room easier for him. But I had spent too much of my life making rooms easier for people who made my life harder. Thank you, I said. But an apology is not the same as change. He looked at me, and this time, he did not argue. The next 60 days were not clean or simple. Yardlight did not magically save everything overnight. We fought bad data, old habits, angry managers, and Preston's quiet attempts to make every delay look like my fault. 2 dispatchers quit. 1 client threatened to walk. My father lost his temper more than once. But something important had changed. The truth was no longer outside the room. Every morning, we reviewed the dashboard. Every afternoon, we adjusted routes. Every Friday, we compared the new numbers to the old ones. Slowly, the company began to breathe again. Late transfers fell. Idle time dropped. Northbridge renewed for 1 year with a review clause. Then another client asked to join the new system. Then a third. By spring, Halden Capital was no longer offering to rescue us. They were asking to invest on our terms. My father declined. Preston eventually returned to the company, but not as heir apparent. He had to run a regional account team and report numbers like everyone else. He hated it at first. Then he learned what the rest of us already knew. A last name can open a door. It cannot do the work for you. Betrayal stopped posting about the company for a while. My mother began attending board meetings as a silent observer, which made me smile because silence, used correctly, can become attention instead of avoidance. And me? I became Chief Strategy Officer of Whitaker Freight and Rail. Not because my father handed me a gift. Because I put the evidence on the table and refused to let them look away. Months later, at our first board meeting after the recovery, my father sat beside me instead of at the head of the table. That small change said more than any speech could have. When the meeting ended, he stayed behind. I thought legacy meant keeping the company in the family, he said. I packed my notes slowly. It does, I said. But only if the family is willing to tell the truth. He nodded. Outside the window, a freight train moved past the yard, slow and steady, carrying more weight than it looked like it could bear. I understood that feeling. For years, I thought being chosen would heal me. I thought one public apology, one title, one moment of recognition would erase every dinner where I had been talked over. It did not. But it gave me something better. It gave me a choice. I could stop asking people to see me and start building a life that made my value clear, with or without their permission. That Christmas Eve did not save my family. It exposed us. And sometimes exposure is the first honest form of mercy. Because a legacy is not protected by giving power to the favorite child. It is not protected by silence, tradition, or a last name written in gold above a door. A legacy survives when the person willing to carry the truth is finally allowed to carry the responsibility. And if there is one lesson I learned from that night, it is this. Never mistake being overlooked for being empty. Never mistake being favored for being capable. And never assume the quiet woman at the end of the table came unprepared.